Have you ever experienced a moment so profound that it reshaped the way you see your entire life? I want to take you on a journey that begins at 17 years old, sitting in an English class with Mrs. Clanton. I remember it like it was yesterday. The words on the page, the ticking of the clock, the sound of pencils scratching on paper, all seemed to fade away as a wave of awareness crashed over me. In that moment, I realized something both exhilarating and terrifying. I only have one life. Just one. No retakes, no do-overs, no second chances before eternity. You see, I had already believed in God. I had been a Christian for years. But faith as I knew it suddenly took on a new weight. It wasn't a new belief that emerged that day. It was the sharp, piercing awareness that life is finite, and every choice matters eternally. My soul felt the gravity of a single life stretched across the horizon of eternity, and I was acutely aware that one wrong move, one wasted year, one misspent moment, could never be reclaimed. I even wrote a poem back then titled The Lost Years. In it, I poured out the fear that I might reach old age without truly understanding life, without discovering what matters most. It expressed the dread of seeing life slip away while I chased trivial things, a fear that still haunts me to this day. And that fear was not crippling, it was clarifying. It created a sense of urgency, a deep desire to live with purpose, to ask the most important questions of life, to never settle for superficial answers. So, what is the weight of one life? It is the emotional burden that insists we face our choices seriously. It is the realization that eternity will not wait for indecision, and that our earthly years are fleeting. And the most pressing questions emerged. What is my purpose? What do I still have left to do with my life? How can I make my one chance count for something that matters beyond today? This, my friends, is where everything begins. The journey to an unwasted life starts with an awakening, a recognition that life is singular and finite. And if you're listening right now, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you living as though you only have one life? Are you aware of the eternal consequences of each choice? Take a second to comment below, tell me where you're watching from, and share one way you hope to live more purposefully in the time you have. Once we embrace this awareness, another question naturally follows. Why? Why are we here? Why does anything exist at all? Many people obsess over origins. Where did we come from? How did the universe begin? But for me, and for anyone seeking an unwasted life, the more pressing question is not where we came from but where we are going. The German language captures this beautifully with two words. Woher meaning cause or origin, and wozu meaning purpose or end. I am by nature a wozu person. My eyes are fixed not on how things started but on why they exist and what they are for. Why do colors dazzle? Why does love stir our hearts so deeply? Why do suffering and joy exist side by side? Why war, disease, and injustice? These are not idle questions. They are the questions that shape the direction of a life well lived. Purpose precedes everything. Purpose illuminates every choice, every relationship, every action. And this focus on purpose over origin is what allows us to live fully, intentionally, and without regret. Between the ages of 17 and 24, while attending college and seminary, I began to crystallize my understanding of these questions. By 24, I had clarity that many people spend a lifetime seeking. But there was one lesson that became absolutely central to me: narrow focus. Do not try to know everything. Do not aim to accumulate 1,000 facts, 100 skills, or endless accolades. Instead, master a few great truths, know them deeply, and let them master you. A life of shallow knowledge and scattered attention will never create durable impact. But a life devoted to a few essential, unchanging truths has the power to shape character, influence others, and stand the test of time. And here is the liberating part. You do not need extraordinary intelligence, emotional genius, wealth, elite schooling, or an ideal family background to live a life of deep purpose. None of these are prerequisites. What you do need is clarity about what matters most, the discipline to pursue it, and the courage to let that pursuit shape every decision. Now, let me share with you the 3 foundational discoveries that have shaped my own life. Discoveries that I believe can guide anyone who desires to live without wasting their single life. The first is the existence of a sovereign, infinitely wise, all-powerful God, whose purpose is to display His glory for the everlasting enjoyment of His redeemed people. This is not abstract theology. This is reality. It is the framework for understanding why we exist and how we are meant to live. The second discovery is Jesus Christ, the central means by which God's glory is revealed, the one who overcomes the obstacles of human sin and wrath, and the one who makes it possible for us to participate in the enjoyment of God's glory. The third discovery is practical and deeply personal. The life that most clearly displays God's glory is a life of joyful suffering in loving service. Joy in trials, perseverance in hardship, love expressed even when it costs. These are the clearest reflections of God's worth. If you are following along so far, I want you to take a moment. Type in the comments where you are watching from and share one thing you hope to do differently after hearing this. Also, if this message resonates with you, hit that subscribe button because we are going to unpack these truths deeply, in ways that will change the way you see your life and your purpose. At 17, I learned that life is a singular, precious gift with eternal consequences. By embracing purpose over origin, mastering a narrow focus, and living in light of God's glory through Christ, we begin the path to an unwasted life. And this is only the beginning. We will dive into the first of these discoveries, understanding the sovereign, glorious God, and see how this realization transforms every decision, every action, and every heartbeat in a life that refuses to be wasted. Now that we've seen the weight of one life and the urgency to live purposefully, let's dive deeper into the first foundational discovery, the existence of an absolutely sovereign, pure, self-existing, all-wise, and all-powerful God. This is the God who is not only real but infinitely glorious, whose purpose is to display His glory for the everlasting joy of His redeemed people. Understanding this truth changes everything, your priorities, your perspective, even your heartbeat. I first encountered this concept in depth through the writings of theologians like R.C. Sproul and Jonathan Edwards. They helped me see God not as a distant idea but as the ultimate reality, self-existent, self-sustaining, infinitely beautiful, all-knowing, all-wise, and all-governing. God does not exist to serve us or cater to our whims. He exists supremely for Himself, and yet, in His infinite wisdom and love, He draws us into His glory so that we may share in eternal joy. When Moses asked God His name in Exodus 3 verse 14, God said, "I am." This is more than just a name. It is a declaration of eternal, uncaused existence. God does not need creation, yet He created all things. God does not need our praise, yet He invites us to treasure Him. This is the God whose purpose is radically God-exalting, and this truth is both theologically profound and emotionally gripping. Imagine for a moment what it means to live under the reality of a God like this. Every star, every mountain, every act of beauty, every moment of love, is not random. Each is a reflection of His glory. And when you understand that God's goal is to be known truly and treasured duly, your own life takes on a new trajectory. Every decision, every action, every relationship is filtered through the lens of making God's glory visible. Now, some of you might be thinking, this sounds overwhelming. Does that mean I have to live perfectly? Does this place impossible pressure on me? Not at all. Understanding God's glory is not about self-condemnation. It's about alignment. When you see God as supremely valuable, as infinitely satisfying, as worthy of every ounce of love in your heart, then your life begins to flow in the direction that matters most. God's glory is not merely to be acknowledged, it is to be treasured above all else. To marvel at Him, to delight in Him, to find your deepest satisfaction in His worth. And here is the key. The universe was created for His glory to be displayed for His people's joy. This means that your life, your work, your thoughts, your joys, and even your struggles can be part of a story that amplifies God's glory and your eternal satisfaction. It is essential to grasp that God's purpose comes before human duty. You were not first, and God is not merely a means to an end for your fulfillment. God's purpose is radically God-centered. Your purpose flows from understanding and aligning with His design. And this realization is exhilarating. It thrills the mind and engages the heart. Some people hear this and feel anger or resistance, but to those who embrace it, it becomes a source of deep, lasting joy. I cannot overstate how important it is to integrate the mind and heart in understanding God's glory. Too many churches and individuals treat belief as purely intellectual or purely emotional. But God's purpose is designed to engage both. It stimulates thought and captures the heart. To know God's glory intellectually is thrilling. To treasure it emotionally is transformative. Combine these and you have a life that is both thoughtful and spiritually alive, a life that cannot be wasted. The Bible repeatedly confirms this truth. Isaiah speaks of God's name, His glory, and His power being made known for His people. Jesus, in John 17 verses 1-5, prays for glorification between Father and Son, showing us that God's glory is not abstract but relational, displayed in the joy and reverence of His people. God is not seeking flattery. He is inviting us into awe, wonder, and delight that will never cease. Consider Romans 9 verses 22-23. Here, God's wrath, power, and patience are revealed to display the riches of his glory to vessels of mercy. These vessels, people like you and me, are designed not only to witness God's glory but to marvel in it, to treasure it, and to rejoice in it eternally. God's glory is inexhaustible. Even in heaven, we will never reach the limit of discovering his majesty. Each new insight, each new glimpse of his beauty, will open doors to even deeper delight. Eternity is a journey through ever-increasing knowledge and enjoyment of God's glory. Picture it, endless mountains of majesty, each peak revealing a new dimension of God's worth. You will never tire of him. You will never be bored. And the life that begins to pursue this glory here on earth becomes a life of unending fulfillment. So, what does this mean for you practically? It means living every day with the awareness that your actions, words, and even your thoughts can either reflect or obscure God's glory. It means taking ordinary moments, meals, conversations, work, family interactions, and intentionally orienting them around what displays his worth. And it means embracing every challenge, every struggle, as an opportunity to participate in the manifestation of that glory. Friends, if this message is hitting you right now, I want you to do something. Comment below where you are watching from. Type out one way you can begin today to focus your life on reflecting God's glory. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel because in the coming videos, we will explore not only God's glory but also how Christ overcomes the obstacles of sin and how joyful suffering manifests it most clearly. I know that hearing about God's glory can feel abstract, even intimidating. But here is the key takeaway: you do not participate in God's glory through perfection. You participate by treasuring him, by orienting your desires toward what is supremely valuable, by allowing your life to echo the reality of his worth. Even small acts of obedience, love, and devotion become brushstrokes in a masterpiece designed to display eternal glory. By embracing this discovery, the sovereign, glorious God, you set the stage for the second discovery: Jesus Christ, who removes the greatest obstacle between us and participation in God's glory, human sin and rebellion. Without Christ, we remain blind to this glory, unable to treasure it fully, and unable to live the unwasted life we were meant for. We will explore how Jesus Christ mediates God's glory, conquers human sin, and opens the path to joy-filled service that magnifies his worth. And as always, if you are ready to commit to this journey, comment below and share one area of your life where you want God's glory to shine most, and make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next revelation. Now that we understand the sovereign, glorious God and the centrality of his purpose, we must face a stark reality: human sin. There is a chasm between God's glory and our ability to participate in it. Every human being left to themselves is blind to God's worth. Our hearts naturally rebel, our minds distort, and our desires prioritize lesser things over the infinite treasure of God. This rebellion is not trivial, it is total. Left unchecked, it bars us from seeing, savoring, and reflecting God's glory. This is where the second discovery comes in: Jesus Christ. He is not simply a teacher, a prophet, or a moral example. He is the divine solution to the obstacle that sin presents. Humanity hates God. We want to live as if God does not exist, or even worse, as if we can be God ourselves. Our sin justifies itself while rejecting the one who alone is supremely worthy. And God's wrath, perfectly righteous, rightly rests on us. Yet God, in his infinite wisdom and love, provided a way. Jesus Christ entered the world, fully God and fully man, to absorb the wrath we deserved, to conquer sin, and to open the way for us to treasure and participate in God's glory. Through Christ, the barrier of human rebellion is removed, not by our effort, but by his perfect obedience and sacrificial love. Consider the profound implications of this. In Ephesians 1, Paul explains that we are predestined and adopted through Jesus Christ, designed from the very foundation of the world to praise the glory of his grace. In 2 Timothy 1 verse 9, we see that salvation is given by grace through Christ before the ages began. Revelation 13 verse 8 declares that our names were written in the Lamb's book of life before creation itself. From eternity past, God designed Christ as the central apex of glory, the one through whom his purpose would be fulfilled. Jesus Christ crucified is the focal point of God's glory. His life, death, and resurrection remove the obstacles that prevent us from treasuring God supremely. The cross is not merely an event in history, it is the mechanism by which God's glory is revealed and made accessible to us. Christ's obedience overcomes our rebellion. His suffering absorbs the righteous wrath of God. His resurrection ensures that those who trust him can share in the everlasting joy of seeing God's glory fully. But how does this work in real life? How do we see God's glory through Christ? It begins with the gospel, the good news that opens blind eyes. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 4 tells us that the gospel is the light of the glory of Christ, the image of God. Sin blinds us, distorts reality, and makes God's worth invisible. The gospel removes that blindness. It allows us to see the true value of God, to treasure Him, and to live in light of that revelation. Understanding this changes everything about life. No longer are your struggles, your daily routines, or your choices meaningless. Every act of faith, every step of obedience, every moment spent reflecting Christ's love, becomes a way to display God's glory. And it is all rooted in Christ, who removed the obstacle of sin. Let me illustrate this with a simple truth. Before Christ, our attempts to please God are tainted by sin. Even our best deeds are insufficient. But through Christ, our hearts are transformed. Faith is no longer mere assent. Repentance is no longer a self-driven act. Both are gifts, enabled by God's grace through the work of Christ. And this transformation empowers us to live the life we were designed for, a life that treasures God above all else. Friends, I want to challenge you right now. Reflect on your life and consider areas where sin has blinded you to God's glory. It could be worry, anger, selfish ambition, pride, or distraction. Now imagine these areas illuminated by the gospel. Imagine Christ stepping in, absorbing the consequence, and freeing your heart to see, treasure, and participate in God's glory. That is the transformative power of Christ. And here is where it becomes personal. Your life can now be oriented toward what matters eternally. You are not merely trying harder to be good. You are living in light of the glory of Christ. Your purpose is no longer abstract. Your actions gain eternal significance. Serving others, persevering in trials, cultivating joy, embracing love. All of these now have the capacity to reflect God's worth. This leads us naturally into the third discovery. The life that displays God's glory most clearly is a life of joyful suffering and loving service. But before we get there, we must first understand the stakes. The reason joyful suffering matters is because sin has wounded the world. Pain, hardship, and injustice are real. We cannot ignore them. But Christ's work shows us that these trials can become the medium through which God's glory is revealed. Being a Christian is not a promise of a trouble-free life. It is a promise that even in suffering, joy can abound. This is the paradox of the unwasted life. In embracing suffering, guided by love and empowered by Christ, you reveal God's glory in ways that comfort, challenge, and inspire others. The world sees joy that defies circumstance. The world sees peace that surpasses understanding. The world sees a satisfaction in God that no trial can diminish. If you are listening right now, I want you to do something tangible. Comment below where you are watching from. Share one struggle that has blinded you to God's glory, and let this be the first step in allowing Christ to illuminate it. And if you haven't yet, click that subscribe button. We will explore the final discovery, how joyful suffering in love becomes the clearest display of God's glory and how this can transform the way you live today. Let me remind you, Jesus Christ is the gateway to seeing, savoring, and participating in God's glory. Without Him, the most profound truths about life remain invisible. With Him, your one life, your single opportunity before eternity, can be lived fully, meaningfully, and eternally significant. And this is the promise. A life aligned with Christ, free from the bondage of sin, empowered by grace, and oriented toward God's glory, is a life that will never be wasted. Every moment, every act of love, every sacrifice becomes one. We will uncover the final discovery, the practical, actionable way to live this unwasted life. Joyfully suffering in service motivated by love. This is where theology meets practice, where belief becomes lifestyle, and where your life becomes a living testament to God's glory. Now we arrive at the final discovery, the one that transforms theological understanding into everyday life. Joyful suffering in loving service. This is the life that most clearly displays God's glory. It is paradoxical but true. The clearest, most compelling testimony to God's worth is not a life of ease, comfort, or worldly success. It is a life that embraces difficulty with joy, serving others with love, and enduring trials for a higher, eternal purpose. Paul provides the perfect example. In Philippians 3, he counts all things as loss in order to gain Christ. He desires to share in Christ's sufferings, to embrace hardship as a way of participating in God's glory. His perspective was radical. Suffering is not punishment, it is a canvas on which God's beauty is displayed. And this perspective challenges us today. When we see trials through this lens, life itself becomes a medium of glory, a platform for joy, and a stage for love. Consider the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5 verses 11 to 16. Jesus speaks directly to this truth. Those who endure persecution, who suffer for righteousness' sake, are blessed. They are to rejoice and be glad. Why? Because their reward in heaven is certain, and their suffering demonstrates the presence of a greater, eternal reality. Joy amid persecution is unusual and impossible apart from the satisfaction found in God. This is the heart of joyful suffering. It is not masochism. It is spiritual vision. It is seeing the eternal where others only see pain. Let me give you a concrete example. You may face challenges at work, impossible deadlines, unfair criticism, or strained relationships. Instead of succumbing to frustration, approach these moments as opportunities to glorify God. Respond with integrity, patience, and a heart that seeks to serve. Your joy in the face of difficulty, your steadfast love, becomes a testimony that cannot be ignored. People notice when satisfaction comes from God rather than circumstance. The same principle applies in relationships. When someone wrongs you, when misunderstandings arise, or when conflict threatens to break connection, a heart rooted in God's glory chooses love and joy over anger or bitterness. The world may scoff, but eternity smiles. Your response reveals a treasure that transcends temporary circumstance, a satisfaction that refuses to be shaken. And in personal struggles, illness, fear, anxiety, or loss, the principle remains. Joyful suffering does not eliminate pain, but it transforms it. When the gospel illuminates your heart, you can endure trials with hope, contentment, and trust. You can participate in God's glory, even in the midst of weakness. Every challenge becomes a prism, reflecting the infinite worth of Christ and the sustaining power of His presence. Here is a practice you can start today. Take a moment to identify a thorn in your life, a trial, a burden, or a persistent challenge. Now imagine offering that struggle to God, not asking Him to remove it immediately, but asking Him to reveal His presence, power, and glory through it. Pray for strength, for love, for joy. And then act in obedience and service, even amid the difficulty. This is the essence of joyful suffering. Being salt of the earth and light of the world, as Jesus describes, is not merely about doing good deeds. Anyone can perform acts of kindness. But being salt and light means living with joy that defies circumstance, radiating hope in a world often marked by despair. Your life becomes a testament to a greater reality, the supreme treasure of Christ, the centrality of God's glory, and the ultimate purpose for which we exist. Now think about the cumulative effect of this life. When joy, love, and purpose intersect in suffering, the world cannot help but notice. Your actions, once ordinary, become extraordinary because they are motivated by an eternal cause. You begin to see your life differently. Daily frustrations, setbacks, and struggles are no longer meaningless obstacles. They are opportunities to participate in the narrative of God's glory. This is also deeply practical. Even the smallest acts can reflect joyful service. A patient word to a coworker, a forgiving response to a family member, a generous hand to someone in need, or a calm heart in the face of anxiety. All of these are reflections of a life oriented around God's glory. They are manifestations of a heart that treasures Christ supremely. And they are the building blocks of a life that cannot be wasted. Friends, if this resonates with you, I encourage you to pause right now. Comment below where you are watching from and share one trial you are committing to surrender to God in order to display His glory. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. We will explore the long-term impact of living an unwasted life and how embracing these three discoveries, God's sovereignty, Christ's redemptive work, and joyful suffering, can transform your entire perspective and experience of life. Let's also take a moment to reflect on the joy inherent in this suffering. It is not superficial happiness. It is not pretending everything is fine when it isn't. This joy is profound, rooted in the eternal satisfaction of knowing God's glory and being part of His purposes. When you can rejoice in suffering, you signal to the world that there is a reality beyond pain, a treasure beyond the fleeting, and a hope that cannot be shaken. Joyful suffering requires discipline, awareness, and dependence on God. It requires seeing through the lens of eternity rather than temporary comfort. And it requires courage. Courage to choose love when hatred is easier, to choose generosity when selfishness is convenient, and to choose faith when doubt and despair call loudly. But when you embrace this path, you step into the life you were designed for. The life that truly glorifies God, benefits others, and fulfills the singular opportunity of your one earthly life. The beauty of this discovery is that it is accessible to everyone. You do not need wealth, influence, or status. You do not need extraordinary talents or accomplishments. All you need is a heart willing to treasure God, a mind willing to understand His glory, and a life willing to serve others in love, even when it costs. This is the pathway to an unwasted life. Finally, consider the ripple effect. When your life reflects God's glory through joyful suffering, others are inspired, encouraged, and drawn toward the same truth. Your obedience becomes an invitation for others to see the beauty of God. Your joy amid trials becomes a living sermon. Your love in action becomes proof that a higher, eternal reality governs your life. Friends, the world is watching. Your family, your friends, your colleagues, even strangers, observe how you navigate difficulty. Will they see despair, bitterness, and self-centeredness? Or will they see hope, joy, and a deep satisfaction in God? The choice is yours, and it begins with recognizing your one life, understanding God's glory, trusting in Christ, and embracing joyful suffering in love. So right now, take a moment. Comment where you're watching from and one way you will begin living joyfully in service this week. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because we will conclude this journey by exploring the long-term significance of the unwasted life, the eternal rewards, and how these discoveries weave together to transform not just one moment but a lifetime. As we move into the next stage of our journey, it's vital to pause and see the bigger picture. The discoveries we've explored, the sovereign, glorious God, the redeeming work of Jesus Christ, and joyful suffering in loving service, are not abstract concepts. They are a roadmap for living a life that is fully aligned with eternity. Understanding this reshapes priorities, decisions, and even the way we measure success. First, consider the long-term impact of living with these discoveries at the center of your life. When you live with a focus on God's glory, your daily struggles take on new meaning. A frustrating workday becomes an arena to display patience and integrity. A painful relationship conflict becomes an opportunity to reflect forgiveness and love. The mundane, the difficult, the ordinary moments of life are transformed into moments of eternal significance. Paul captures this idea beautifully in 2 Corinthians 4 verses 17 to 18. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. The unwasted life is a life that continuously evaluates the temporal in light of the eternal. This perspective allows us to endure suffering with hope, joy, and courage. Living this way also brings a profound sense of freedom. Many people are trapped by fear, guilt, or the relentless pursuit of status, wealth, or approval. But when your life is rooted in God's glory and guided by Christ, these pressures lose their power. You are free to pursue what truly matters, free to invest in relationships, free to serve, and free to rejoice even when life is hard. This freedom is not a license for indulgence but a liberation to live purposefully. Integration of these discoveries into daily life requires intentionality. Start by asking simple, focused questions each morning. What can I do today to glorify God in my thoughts, words, and actions? How can I serve others in love, even if it is inconvenient or uncomfortable? Where can I practice joy amid trials, trusting that God's purposes are greater than my current challenges? Even small acts, repeated consistently, compound over time. Over weeks, months, and years, these seemingly ordinary moments build a life that reflects the wisdom of the eternal and the beauty of God's glory. One of the most powerful aspects of living the unwasted life is how it changes our perception of suffering. Suffering is no longer random, meaningless, or merely painful. Through the lens of these three discoveries, suffering becomes a tool for growth, an instrument for displaying God's glory, and an opportunity for deep, lasting joy. It is a paradox. The more willingly we embrace it in love, the more it becomes a source of spiritual vitality. Let's also consider relationships. Our interactions with family, friends, colleagues, and even strangers are opportunities to reflect Christ's love and God's glory. A patient response to irritation, a generous act toward someone in need, or a gentle correction in humility, all of these are ways to glorify God and display the beauty of a life aligned with His purpose. Remember, the smallest gestures can become eternal testimonies when motivated by joy and love. Now think about your work, your career, and your ambitions. Many chase titles, paychecks, or recognition, measuring life by worldly standards. But the unwasted life evaluates every goal through a spiritual lens. Does this action glorify God? Does this pursuit align with Christ? Will this decision demonstrate joy and love even in adversity? This realignment transforms ordinary tasks into divine opportunities. Your vocation, no matter how seemingly mundane, becomes sacred when done for God's glory. And here's a profound insight. Living with this perspective produces joy that is unlike any other. This joy is not dependent on circumstances. It is not fleeting. It is rooted in eternal truths, in the unchanging character of God, in the victory of Christ, and in the purpose-filled life that suffering and service create. You can experience this joy today, not just in the future, because it is anchored in the reality of God's glory. Friends, if you feel inspired right now, pause and comment below where you are watching from. Share one area in your life where you want to begin living with this eternal perspective. And if you haven't yet, subscribe so that you can continue this journey of purpose, discovery, and practical application. The eternal perspective also changes how we view success and failure. Life is not measured by achievements alone but by faithfulness, alignment with God's glory, and the demonstration of love through suffering. Knowing your purpose, even if you fall short in practice, is more significant than temporary success. God sees your heart, your efforts, and your perseverance. This truth frees you from the burden of comparison and the despair of imperfection. Let's reflect on the cumulative impact of integrating all three discoveries. God's sovereign glory provides the ultimate reason for living, anchoring your heart and mind in what is truly valuable. Jesus Christ's redemptive work removes the barrier of sin, enables sight of God's glory, and opens the pathway for participation in His eternal purposes. Joyful suffering in love transforms everyday trials into testimony, every act of service into reflection, and every challenge into an opportunity for eternal significance. When these three converge, life is no longer wasted. Time is maximized, joy is multiplied, and purpose is clarified. You become a person whose life demonstrates the infinite worth of God, whose suffering points others to hope, and whose service makes heaven visible in the here and now. Now, consider this practical exercise. Choose 1 week to intentionally live with these discoveries in mind. Each day, journal the moments where you can glorify God, serve others, and embrace joy in trials. Reflect on how your perspective changes, how your heart responds differently, and how your relationships and actions begin to reflect the beauty of an unwasted life. Friends, this is not theoretical. This is actionable. And it is life-changing. The one life you have been given is enough, not because it is long or easy, but because it can be fully oriented toward eternal purpose, joy, and glory. So, right now, I encourage you to comment below where you're watching from and one way you will begin integrating these three discoveries this week. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Finally, we will bring all the lessons together and conclude with a powerful call to live a life that is never wasted. As we reach the final stage of this journey, it's time to reflect, synthesize, and commit. We've explored the weight of a single life, the centrality of God's glory, the redeeming work of Jesus Christ, and the power of joyful suffering in loving service. All of these discoveries converge into one practical truth. Your life can be fully aligned with eternity, meaningful, and impactful in ways that endure forever. Let's first recap. Discovery 1 revealed that God is sovereign, glorious, self-existing, and infinitely wise. His purpose for creation is to display His glory for the everlasting joy of His people. When your life is oriented around this reality, nothing is trivial. Every decision, every relationship, every struggle becomes a canvas for reflecting God's infinite value. Discovery 2 illuminated the pathway through human sin. We are naturally blind, self-centered, and separated from God. But Christ bridges the gap. Through His life, death, and resurrection, the obstacle of sin is removed, enabling us to see, savor, and participate in God's glory. Without Him, knowledge of God's glory remains inaccessible, and life becomes wasted in the pursuit of fleeting, inferior treasures. Discovery 3 gave us the actionable principle. The clearest display of God's glory is a life of joyful suffering in loving service. Trials, hardships, and personal sacrifices are not signs of divine neglect. They are opportunities to display God's beauty, participate in His purposes, and cultivate eternal joy. Serving others, enduring pain, and persevering in faith reflect the glory of Christ in tangible ways. Now comes the practical question. How do we live this unwasted life today? The answer lies in intentionality, focus, and daily choices. Begin each day with awareness. Recognize that life is singular, no do-overs, no second chances. Ask yourself, what will I do today to glorify God, love others, and endure with joy? This moment-by-moment awareness transforms mundane routines into spiritual opportunities. Let's break it down further. First, prioritize God's glory. Every thought, word, and action should reflect an understanding that your life exists to honor Him. This doesn't mean perfection, but it does mean intentionality. Pause before responding in frustration. Choose generosity over selfishness. Align ambitions with eternal values rather than temporary recognition. Second, embrace Christ. Continually remind yourself that any ability to live purposefully, any capacity to love, any endurance through suffering comes through him. Pray for awareness of his presence, trust in his guidance, and delight in his grace. Let your heart be formed by the gospel daily, allowing Christ to shape your perspective, priorities, and responses. Third, welcome joyful suffering. Identify areas in your life where challenges exist. Relationships, work, health, finances, or personal growth. Rather than avoiding these trials, seek to endure them with love and joy. Ask God to display his glory through your response. Even small acts of patience, kindness, and integrity in the face of difficulty reflect the highest purpose and point others to the infinite value of Christ. Consider your one life as a series of opportunities to invest in eternity. Every act of service, every moment of perseverance, every choice to rejoice amidst hardship compounds into a life that leaves a lasting mark. When you live with focus on God's glory, empowered by Christ, and willing to suffer joyfully for love, you are not merely surviving, you are thriving in purpose. Friends, I want you to engage with this message actively. Comment below where you're watching from and one specific way you will begin living an unwasted life starting today. Share a trial you will surrender, a service you will offer, or a mindset you will adopt. By committing publicly, you solidify the intention and inspire others to do the same. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel to continue this journey of transformation, reflection, and purpose. Let's also reflect on the eternal perspective. Life, as fleeting as it seems, is infinitely significant when measured against eternity. Heaven is not simply an escape from suffering, it is an ever-increasing, endless experience of God's glory. Every revelation, every act of praise, every encounter with his beauty will unfold infinitely. This understanding should invigorate every moment we live here on earth. Think about the ripple effect of your life. When you live with purpose, joy, and love, those around you are impacted. Families are strengthened, friendships are deepened, communities are inspired, and even strangers can glimpse God's glory through your actions. The unwasted life is never confined to the individual, it extends outward, transforming the world one person, one act, and one choice at a time. And finally, consider the integration of all three discoveries as a daily rhythm. Morning reflection aligns your mind with God's glory. Daily awareness ensures Christ mediates every action. Evening reflection recognizes joyful suffering and service in the light of eternal purpose. Over time, this rhythm becomes a lifestyle, a way of being that is unmistakably centered on God, resilient in adversity, and impactful beyond measure. Let's close with a call to action. Begin today. Treasure God supremely, let every action glorify him. Rely on Christ fully, acknowledge that all purpose, joy, and endurance come through him. Embrace trials with joy and love. See hardships as opportunities to reveal God's glory and serve others. Friends, your life is a singular gift, filled with eternal consequences. Do not waste it. Live intentionally. Love deeply. Rejoice always. Serve faithfully. And in doing so, your life will shine as a testimony to the infinite worth of God, the redeeming power of Christ, and the eternal joy of participation in his glory. So once more, comment where you're watching from, share one way you will apply these discoveries this week, and subscribe if you haven't yet. Let's build a community of believers committed to living unwasted lives, fully devoted to God's glory and empowered by Christ's love. Remember this truth: one life, eternal consequences, and infinite opportunity to glorify God. Make your life count. Make it eternal. Make it glorifying.